Hey guys, it's Adam. I want to ask you a question. What if there was one thing quietly sitting behind almost every good decision you've made in your business? The one thing that helped you take on the right projects, the thing that allowed you to be more selective, the thing in the background that reduced some of the financial pressure that so many designers and decorators experience. Because when I look back over we're pushing 20 years here in the business, there are lots of things I would say that contributed to my success in my solo design business. Definitely my pricing, which was a process to figure out over time, my turnkey process for sure. The professional photography, got to have that. The published projects need that. Really clear systems, strong boundaries, they have all mattered. But there's been something else quietly sitting in the background that made all of those things easier to build. And looking back, I honestly think it became the foundation that allowed my business to grow. To a degree, that's what today's episode's really all about. The secret that built or helped build my solo interior design business. Now, if you've been following me for a while, some of you may already know what that secret is, but for many of you, it's going to come as a surprise because it certainly isn't what the design industry tells us that we're supposed to do. And what is that secret, to cut to the chase? I never quit my day job. How about that? Now, bear with me. I know this is an unpopular opinion. It isn't glamorous. In fact, many designers feel embarrassed to admit they still have another source of income. It's like kind of this dirty little secret. They think it means they're failing in business. But I actually think it can be one of the smartest business decisions you make. Some of you may have already switched this video off or left the podcast. That's all good. But for those of you who are still here, let me explain. In this video, or if you're listening on the podcast, this episode, I'm going to share 5 benefits that keeping another source of income gave me while I built my design business, and might be 5 things you might want to consider yourself. Because ultimately, what it did was remove the desperation that often came with running a creative business. So before we begin, I think there's 3 financial situations most designers fall into. So think about where you fit. Have a think about it now. And this information is based on more than 50 conversations I've had with interior designers over the last 18 months. Number 1, the shared income household. So you're in a relationship or a marriage with 2 incomes and you contribute significantly to the household, but you aren't solely responsible for every bill. If your income slows for several months, it could be uncomfortable, but it isn't catastrophic. Number 2, the sole income designer. So you are on your own. The mortgage, rent, groceries, and bills sit entirely with you. If your business slows for several months, eventually the pressure becomes very real. And the third, number 3, the financially secure designer. So for whatever reason, income isn't your primary concern. Perhaps there are savings, investments, or other support. You still want the business to succeed, but a slow year wouldn't fundamentally change your life. Now, from my interviews, around 80% of designers sit in either category 1 or category 2, the 2 I just mentioned, the first 2. And that means household income deserves serious consideration. Now, let me tell you my story. I had a successful corporate career, but in 2018, I left and went all in on my design business. Initially, there was a good amount of work coming in. There was real momentum and there was good money. But then there were dry periods. So when I made that good money, it often seemed to disappear during the quieter months. It came in and it got sucked back out. And I realized I hated that uncertainty. The other thing, look, I'll admit, I wasn't an essential service. I wasn't working with builders every day. I wasn't designing kitchens and bathrooms week after week. My superpower was decoration. I love the color, the layering, the artwork, the wallpapers, all that crazy stuff, that good stuff, textiles, styling. My work has never really been the mainstream kind of black, white, and timber tones aesthetic that might appeal more to the masses. And my strength was never technical drawing, still isn't. So I wasn't the designer producing, construction drawings or detailed kitchen plans all day. I tried to do that, but it simply wasn't where my skills or interests sat. Some designers can generate additional income. I've spoken to them producing those drawings and documentation or technical work for other designers. And many happily spend, hours in CAD or SketchUp these days. But that was never going to be me. My strength was always helping clients create, beautifully finished homes, but more on the decorative edge there. Now, because I was single too, the financial responsibility sat entirely with me. There was not another income source I could rely on. There was no safety net. So eventually, I ended up returning to full time work. Now, you may be asking, well, that's all very well, Adam, but how on earth do you really manage a full time job and an interior design business at the same time? How can that work? And that's a fair question, isn't it? Because it's one thing to say, keep your day job, but it's another thing entirely to explain how you actually make that work. So for me, it came down to three things. Firstly, I dramatically reduced the amount of time I needed to spend on each project. Secondly, I created a much simpler business model built around flat fees, clear boundaries, and straightforward billing. So it made it all a lot simpler. And thirdly, I made enough from each project that I didn't need to take everything that came along. The reality is that I don't need 10 or 15 projects a year. Two or three good projects are more than enough for me. I would prefer less. I might do a handful of my 2-hour power plan consultations, which is a really well priced, but it's a DIY service with minimal time outlay from me, but it's a solid income stream. And that is it. If a project requires the technical drawings, I outsource them. If there's a construction element, which there can be, there is generally a builder or a contractor managing that side of the project. I'm not spending my evenings producing drawings. I'm not managing building sites every day. And I'm not trying to be everything to everyone. I just want to be clear here. Instead, I focus on the decorative side of the business where my strengths lie, and reducing the amount of time you spend delivering projects it's probably an entire episode in itself. And I think I will get to that one. But what happened next completely changed the way I worked. I rebuilt my business around those systems, really clear processes, short bursts of client contact, not out shopping with them and running around town with them, spending time, which I think is a waste of time in a lot of cases. Uh, Strong boundaries. I mentioned that before. A watertight implementation process. I run that show. It's my way or the highway when it comes to full service, that is. But I created it. It works. A process that could operate even when I was working a full time job. And the truth is, most of my clients would never have known that had a full time job. Their experience wasn't compromised and the project still ran smoothly. That's when I realized the business I built wasn't dependent on me being available all day, every day, like some designers are or seem to be. It was dependent on the systems I'd put in place. So I was just remembering recently I spoke to a designer in the United States who was working on a substantial project involving, master bathroom, powder room, several furnished rooms, which is a great project. She was doing really well and she smiled during our conversation and she said, Adam, I watched your video about still having a day job. This isn't the first time I've spoken about it. And she said, that's me too. She told me that hearing me speak openly about it made her feel comfortable enough to admit it to herself. And it made me realize there's probably many more designers, I know there are, quietly doing exactly the same thing that I'm talking about. So let's talk about the 5 benefits. Let's get on with that. Benefit number 1, no feast or famine. One of the things this designer and I laughed about was that neither of us really worried about feast and famine, feast or famine. Neither of us was lying awake wondering how we'd pay that mortgage if a project was delayed. Neither of us needed every inquiry. Neither of us was desperate. And that changes your decision making. Now, before we continue, I've created a free resource called the Solo Designer Profit Guide, which walks you through the numbers every independent designer should understand. You'll find the link below if you would like it. It's Turnkey Design Success /profit guide. Or if you're watching on YouTube, just have a look at that QR code there if you want to scan it and download it. Because whether you decide to work in design full time or whether you decide to keep another source of income, it actually doesn't really matter. The question is, how much money can you make from the least amount of unnecessary time, the stress and back and forth with clients? So this guide isn't simply about, working out your hourly rate. It's about understanding the true cost of your time. I go into that. What can happen if you're endlessly revising and having unpaid meetings, chasing money, the constant demands? So, in many ways, this profit model complements my entire turnkey approach and my way of living. So, even when working a full time job, I can make all this happen. How about that? Because my system designed to reduce the amount of time that I spend on projects while increasing both profitability and the client experience. Because whether you're working full or part time, surely the goal's the same, to make the greatest return from the time you invest. So again, you can scan the QR code if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening, you can download it. Again, turnkeydesign success.com /profit guide. See what you think. Benefit number 2. Let's get back to the benefits. You can wait for the right clients. When you don't need every dollar, you can say no. You can avoid, those people coming in with budgets, these sort of too low budgets, and they want to do the world with them. You don't have to take those projects, unless they can increase the budget. You can avoid those difficult clients, the people you really don't like. You can avoid projects that simply aren't a good fit. Desperation's expensive because the projects you take when you need the money are often the projects that make the least amount of money. Don't you find that? Low budgets, the endless changes, demanding clients, they can be difficult, and too many unpaid hours start to rack up. So you're staying busy, but you don't really get ahead. So many designers take projects because they need them, not because they want them, they just need them. And often those projects become the hardest projects because they're taking anything. Benefit number 3, you can invest in your business. Many of the things that help a design business grow require money before they produce results. You might want a better website. You can hire a professional rather than spending weeks trying to build one yourself and ending up with something that still, doesn't function properly, or have that polished result that represents a premium business that you aspire to show those potential new customers. Client and industry events. How about getting involved and putting on one of those? You could host a drinks evening, sponsor a showroom event, collaborate or gather past clients together. Get everybody together. These experiences build relationships and referrals, getting us off Instagram for 5 minutes, but they require an upfront investment. You might want professional support, so you can pay for coaching. I've had lots of coaching, really benefited from my coaching. Hire a bookkeeper. I'm not good with books. Get legal advice. Or go on an international 3-day design conference where you get to learn and network with other designers without feeling the pinch of, how much money this is going to cost, and I don't have the money at the time this event's happening. So many of these expenses are legitimate business deductions, but you still need the cash, don't you, available to make the investment in the first place. Because when your household isn't relying entirely on your design dollars, you can make those decisions earlier. You don't have to wait until the business feels big enough. I've got to wait. It's going to happen eventually to justify the outlay. Now, sometimes the things that grow a business aren't client projects at all. They're the investments you make in between them. So benefit number 4, you remove the pressure projects. Oh, sorry, remove the pressure. Projects get delayed. They do. Clients postpone. People change their minds. That happens. The project you thought would fill the next 4 to 6 months suddenly moves to next year. Has that happened to you? And while we often don't talk about it publicly, there can be pressure at home when that happens as well. Over the past few months, several designers have told me that their, partner had reached a point where they wanted some certainty about the future. Not because they didn't believe in their partner's business, but because they couldn't continue really carrying the household finances in the same way indefinitely. So at some point, difficult conversations had to happen, and that relationship pressure's real. I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. The reality is that even established design businesses can have quieter periods. This happens to everybody. Work comes in waves, projects get pushed out, timelines change. How many designers have you heard that have had to put someone off? Having another income, a source of income, can remove some of the strain from your household and your relationships because not every delay or postponed project suddenly becomes a financial crisis at home. Talking to the solopreneurs here, benefit number five, you build the business your way. I've now spoken to several designers who have almost whispered that they still have another job. I've still got this other job. But why are we whispering? Why are we embarrassed? The number of hours you work doesn't make you a great designer or a successful designer. The work you do makes you a fabulous designer, a successful designer. The projects you complete, the clients you help that love what you've done, those things make you a successful designer. Now, I can already hear someone saying, Adam, I just think if people simply got to marketing harder, they wouldn't need this other job. Well, maybe, but after speaking with more than 50, 60 interior designers and decorators, I also realized something else. Many designers don't actually have a time problem, they have a confidence problem, a fear of rejection. Because even if I gave some designers another 40 hours every week, they still wouldn't join BNI. Get out and approach builders with, a proposal. Ask for referrals. Speak publicly in a forum where you can speak to potential new clients, seeing you face to face. Build strategic relationships, attend networking events, put themselves in situations where they might hear the word no. So many of the activities that generate work require us to leave our comfort zones, to be visible out in the world. I'm not talking about talking to whoever on Instagram, to follow up with people, to risk that rejection. The reality is that some designers don't need more time or more tactics for getting more clients. They need more courage to get out there and get those meetings happening. And if I say that, I say it without judgment because I've experienced this myself. And that's not a criticism either. It's simply recognizing that not everybody wants to spend every spare hour marketing. I get it. Perhaps the answer isn't becoming a somebody you're not. Let's take that perspective. Perhaps it's building a business that suits your personality. And perhaps this is the question people are really asking me. Adam, if you've still got another job, then why do you need to do the design at all? And honestly, do you know what nirvana looks like for me? A fantastic project. The opportunity comes along, the client engages me to decorate their home. If a kitchen or bathroom forms part of that project, that's all good too. But we engage a contractor or building team to manage that work. I don't even oversee the construction process. My clients trust my design process and they rely on me to guide the overall vision and that finished outcome. Make it happen. I run the decorating side. Money's paid up front. I don't discount anything. I don't compromise on the process. We move swiftly through my process, and 3 or 4 months later, that project is complete. Clients thrilled. The photographs are beautiful, always photographs, and I've satisfied that creative part of myself that I absolutely need in my life. I still want to design. Then I take a holiday, a really nice holiday. I travel well. Business class, hello, great hotel, maybe, and I enjoy the rewards for that work. And then I happily return to my other work, which I don't hate because the creative part of me has been fulfilled. I've got something back in my life. I've done beautiful work. I've delivered a wonderful experience. I'm happy to say that. The client's happy and the photographs exist forever because that's the part people don't understand. I am not desperate. I don't have to take every project. I don't have to be frightened about changing my fee structure and hoping people will pay it. I don't have to be afraid of improving my process because when you're desperate, it's hard, isn't it? It's very difficult to charge more confidently, improve your processes, make changes, create more of those boundaries, say no to people, stand up for yourself respectfully. You'll often take whatever work gets thrown in front of you and sort of grin and bear it. Now, if your dream is to run your own full-time design business and rely entirely on that income, that's absolutely possible. People do it, don't they? But I think we all need to understand this. You're going to need to market, honey, constantly. Referrals, you're going to need to ask for them. Relationship building, definitely. Networking, yep. Creating content, that's part of it. Builder connections, maybe partnerships. Get out there and get visible consistently. The work doesn't simply arrive, and perhaps that's a real message of this video. There isn't one correct path. Some designers want to market relentlessly and build a large business. Great, go and do it. Good on you if you're doing that. But others want a smaller number of wonderful projects every year without all of that struggle. Perhaps both are perfectly valid. Because if you're still working another job while you're building your design business, perhaps you're not behind. You're just building your business your way. And on that note, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. Or if you're listening to the podcast, leave me a review maybe. Tell me what you think. But until next time, stay inspired and bye for now.